They say weddings are a celebration of love, a gathering of people who matter, united in joy. But sometimes they're just a well-decorated battleground, where old resentments wear dresses and sip champagne like everything's fine. When I arrived at Jessica's wedding, heels clicking against the polished marble of the hotel lobby, I wasn't nervous. I was hopeful. Foolishly so, in retrospect. My stomach fluttered, not from anxiety, but from some fragile belief that this day might mark a turning point between us. Maybe the years of cold shouldering, the subtle digs at family dinners, the competition I never signed up for. Maybe all that would melt away under the glow of candlelight and shared laughter. But then I saw the seating chart. It was pinned to a gilded easel, elegant cursive printed on cream cardstock. I scanned it, my eyes instinctively jumping toward the F section. Emily Foster. Table 17. I walked toward the reception hall. The grand double doors were wide open, revealing a room of opulence, crystals dripping from chandeliers, roses blushing in shades of ivory and blush. A string quartet humming near the arch. Everything was soft, warm, picture-perfect. Until I found table 17. Tucked behind a massive marble column, near the swinging doors where waiters bustled with trays of shrimp cocktails and mini sliders. The table barely had a view of the aisle. No, scratch that, it had no view of the aisle. Just a side angle of a utility cart parked in the hallway and a trash bin hidden under a white linen skirt. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, surely. But then I saw the name card, Emily written in the same pristine calligraphy, anchored beside a butter knife. No centerpiece, no guest next to me, just an empty chair and a silent message. You're not meant to be seen. My throat tightened. A quiet, disbelieving laugh bubbled out, but it caught before it reached the air. I stood frozen, one hand on the back of the chair, the other still holding the soft pink envelope with my wedding card inside. My grip tightened until the paper crinkled. That's when Jessica appeared. She was radiant, I'll give her that. A custom lace gown, hair swept into an effortless chignon, makeup that made her look airbrushed, like a walking magazine spread. She spotted me immediately. The smirk curled slowly, like she had been waiting for this moment. She glided over, glass of champagne in hand, eyes gleaming like polished glass. Her voice was low, amused. Didn't think you'd actually come. I'd opened my mouth, but she didn't wait. Her eyes dropped to my seat, then back to me. You don't deserve a real seat. The words cut through the music and chatter like a needle to a balloon. Sharp, cold, delivered with that same tone she always used when she talked down to me, as if I were some failed draft of the woman she became. Then she turned and walked away, hips swaying to the rhythm of the quartet, not even waiting for a reaction. And just like that, the illusion shattered. I stood there stunned, not because I hadn't expected her to be petty, but because I had hoped stupidly that she'd moved on from this rivalry she invented. I had imagined a grown woman, not the same girl who used to brag about her A's while scoffing at my sketchbooks. A lump formed in my chest, heavy and familiar. That same sinking weight I used to feel as a teenager when she would parade her accomplishments while mine were barely acknowledged. When she got her law school acceptance and I got a silent nod for my freelance project that landed on a magazine cover. The difference was always there, subtle but relentless. And now, here I was, a full-grown woman being placed, literally, behind a column, out of sight, out of mind, an afterthought. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out or cause a scene. That would have given her exactly what she wanted. A dramatic exit she could gossip about later. A story to twist into a punchline at brunch. But something shifted inside me, like a tight wire snapping. There's a moment, quiet but irreversible, when you realize someone has mistaken your kindness for weakness for far too long. When the desire to keep peace is no longer greater than the need to stand for yourself. This was that moment. I straightened my back, folded the crumpled card, and looked out across the golden room. Guests laughing, champagne flowing, Jessica glowing in her lie of perfection. And me? I was done playing invisible. I hadn't yet decided what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to sit behind that damn column. Not today. Not ever again. The music swelled with artificial joy, violins playing a waltz no one was dancing to, just filling the air so the silence of expectation wouldn't feel so loud. The guests were all seated now, pearls gleaming, champagne glasses sweating in manicured hands. Laughter trickled across the room like a perfume cloud, sweet, practiced, empty. And I stood behind that marble column still, invisible. The back of my neck felt flushed, though the ballroom was cold. I could smell fried hors d'oeuvres from the swinging kitchen doors beside me, a stark contrast to the roses and eucalyptus on every centerpiece. There was something about that moment, how out of place I felt in a room that should have felt like family. I scanned the tables, our uncles in tailored suits, Jessica's friends from law school in pastel satin, even that one cousin from Nebraska we hadn't seen since Grandpa's funeral. They all had front-row views, they all mattered more than me. And I was the sister. The only sister. The humiliation didn't burn hot like fire. It burned cold, creeping slowly through my limbs like frostbite. The kind that doesn't scream, it stings in silence. And then I saw Daniel. He stood at the altar straight-backed, a little stiff in his dark navy suit. His hands were folded in front of him, clutching the edge of his notes like a lifeline. His expression was polite, poised, but not quite happy. His eyes moved with purpose, but they didn't sparkle. Not like you'd expect from a groom watching his future unfold. And something inside me shifted, because Daniel had always seen me, the real me. Not the one Jessica reduced with offhanded jokes about my struggling artist lifestyle or my chaotic little Brooklyn apartment. At every family event, while Jessica floated above us all like a queen, Daniel would drift over and talk to me about the books he was reading, about the creative agency he admired in the city. Once at Thanksgiving, Jessica had stormed off after our mom made an innocent comment about how beautiful my new painting was. She couldn't stand not being the center of the conversation. Daniel stayed behind to help me clear the dishes. No one asked him to. And now he looked out over the crowd, eyes dull, smile too measured. I didn't make a plan. My body moved before my brain caught up. I stepped out from behind the column. One foot, then another, heels clicking against the ballroom floor, each step cutting through the music like a needle dragging across a record. Voices quieted. Whispers curled through the room like smoke. I felt their eyes, their confusion, their curiosity. Who's that? What is she doing? I didn't flinch. Jessica's back was to me, facing the altar, but I could feel the tension snap in her spine the moment she realized I was moving toward them. Her veil shifted slightly. She was turning her head, ever so slowly. I walked directly down the aisle. Not to a seat, not to a table. To Daniel. He turned just before I reached him, startled. His brow furrowed, not angry, not embarrassed, just surprised. His hands dropped from the notes in front of him, and his gaze searched mine like I had broken some unspoken rule, but maybe not one he had ever believed in. I leaned in low enough not to cause a scene, but loud enough to be heard over the fading music. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" He blinked, a flicker of confusion, then understanding, and without a single glance at Jessica he nodded. Yes, of course. The air cracked. Gasps didn't come in waves, they came in sharp little bursts around the room. Jessica's mouth dropped open, stunned silence radiating off her like static. Her bouquet lowered slightly, fingers twitching around the ribbon. Daniel stepped down from the altar beside me, and we walked just a few feet away, toward the floral arch, tucked beside a line of hydrangeas. "What's wrong?" he asked, voice soft, yet tense with real concern. This wasn't the voice of a man annoyed with drama. This was the voice of someone who knew something was off, who had suspected it, maybe for longer than he'd admit. I looked him straight in the eye. My throat was dry, but my words came out crisp. I was seated behind the column, alone, next to the trash bins and kitchen doors, and when I asked Jessica why, she said I didn't deserve a real seat. I didn't dress it up. I didn't add emotion. I let the raw facts stand bare. Daniel's eyes didn't widen in disbelief. They closed, as if confirming something heavy he had carried quietly. "I've been having doubts," he said finally, his voice low, as if admitting something even to himself. Then barely a whisper, This seals it." He looked back toward the crowd, toward Jessica. And in that pause, in that breath of silence between us, I knew. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. Daniel's steps back toward the altar weren't hurried. They were measured slow, like a man walking toward a final judgment he'd already accepted. The air shifted around him, almost physically. You could feel it, that eerie moment before a storm when the light changes and every leaf stands still. Something in the room knew what was coming, even if no one could name it yet. Jessica's dress rustled sharply as she turned toward him, her jaw clenched tight. The smile she'd been wearing, perfectly rehearsed, radiant and hollow, vanished. Her voice sliced through the heavy quiet. "What did she tell you?" "She didn't even say my name. Just she, like I was a fly buzzing at the edge of her vision, something to be swatted and forgotten." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were on the microphone resting on the sleek silver stand beside the efficient's binder. And then, without asking permission, without hesitation, he took it. The soft hum of feedback snapped every neck in the room. And then Daniel spoke. His voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise in anger. But it cut. Clean and sharp, like the first cold breath of winter. "Before we begin, I need to say something." A hush rippled across the guests. You could almost hear the champagne bubbles die in their glasses. Even the string quartet, unsure what to do, trailed off mid-note. "Today," he continued, "I saw the woman I was about to marry humiliate her own sister. In public. On our wedding day." Gasps echoed. Actual gasps. Not polite surprise, shock. Jessica froze. Her face twitched, caught somewhere between fury and disbelief. Daniel didn't stop. "I saw someone I thought I knew, someone I believed in, treat her only sibling like garbage, like she didn't belong, as if kindness and dignity were optional." He paused for half a second, long enough for the words to settle. Long enough for Jessica's carefully constructed world to start buckling under the weight of what was happening. If this is how she treats family, what kind of wife would she be? It wasn't a question. It was a statement in disguise, a verdict already rendered. Then the final blow. "I can't go through with this." There it was, like thunder crashing after a lightning strike, slow to arrive but impossible to ignore. The room erupted, not in noise, but in a collective full-body gasp. The kind you feel in your spine, the kind that steals the breath from everyone at once. Aunt Meredith dropped her purse. One of Jessica's bridesmaids clasped a hand over her mouth, mascara already sliding down one cheek. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," like a prayer or a curse. Jessica looked like someone had reached inside her and flipped a switch. The poise, the grandeur, it shattered. Her hands shook. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Daniel," she screeched, voice cracking under pressure, "you can't be serious." He didn't answer. He didn't yell. He didn't match her hysteria. That was the most devastating part. He simply looked at her. Just looked. The kind of look that doesn't need words. The kind that says, "I see you now. All of you." And then, calmly, almost gently, he placed the microphone back on the stand. The metal clicked against the holder with a finality that rang louder than any spoken sentence. He turned and walked. Not rushed, not ashamed. Just done. And in his wake, a silence deeper than any I've ever known settled over the room. No one moved. No one knew how to move. Jessica stood frozen in place, the train of her dress still perfectly fanned out, but her eyes wild. Her veil trembled with every shallow breath. The glare of the chandelier above her made her makeup look too sharp now, too heavy, like a mask cracking under heat. She turned toward the guests, as if begging someone, anyone, to do something, to validate her version of reality, to fix this moment and shove it back into the perfect Instagram square she'd curated. But no one moved. No one spoke, because they had all seen it, all heard it. There was no unseeing it now, no speech to smooth it over. No PR spin for a crowd that had just watched a man walk away from a woman he no longer recognized. And me? I didn't move either. I stood quietly, watching as the wreckage of Jessica's illusions settled around her like ash after a fire. She wanted a show. She wanted to humiliate me. But now all eyes were on her. And she had no script for this scene. Time didn't move the way it normally does after Daniel walked away. It didn't tick, it hung, thick in the air, suspended like the last note of a song that never ends. The string quartet kept playing, mechanically, clumsily, like they hadn't seen what we'd all just witnessed. A delicate arrangement of Vivaldi bleeding awkwardly into the silence, each note now feeling inappropriate, artificial, out of place. One violinist looked visibly shaken, fingers trembling over the strings. Servers stood frozen mid-step, their trays of champagne flutes trembling slightly, the bubbles inside still rising, unaware their celebration had soured into spectacle. No one reached for a glass. The air smelled of roses, citrus, and something else, something sharp and human. Panic, maybe, shame. At the front of the hall, Jessica hadn't moved. She stood like a statue cracked from the inside out, eyes fixed on the door Daniel had just walked through, lips parted as if still waiting for him to come back and say it was a joke, that it wasn't real, that he loved her enough to overlook everything. But no one spoke those words. No one moved to console her. The groom's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Reed, stood with their hands clasped tightly in front of them, their expressions unreadable but pale. Mrs. Reed blinked slowly, as if she were reprocessing every moment of the past year through a new lens. Mr. Reed's jaw was rigid, his lips a flat line, the kind of expression that says we'll talk later but not here, the kind of quiet fury reserved not for strangers but for family. And me? I just stood there. I didn't fidget, I didn't shrink. I didn't try to disappear. For once in my life I held my ground. Not as a spectacle, not as a victor, but as a woman who refused to be pushed behind a column one more time. I hadn't planned any of it. I hadn't come to expose my sister. I hadn't come to unravel her day. But I wasn't going to apologize either. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I didn't let the silence swallow me. I didn't let the shame nest inside me like it had so many times before. Jessica had made her choices. I had simply chosen not to let them define me anymore. She fled minutes later. Still in her gown, veil trailing like the ghost of what the day was supposed to be. Someone called her name, maybe one of the bridesmaids. Jessica didn't look back. Her heels clicked violently against the tile as she shoved past the chairs, past the stunned guests, past the collapsing facade of her perfect day. No one followed. Eventually, people started to leave, hesitant at first, like they were waiting for someone to tell them it was okay to go. They moved slowly, gathering purses and jackets with the dazed shuffle of people exiting a theater after the ending went wrong. Some kept their eyes low, too polite or too stunned to say anything. But others stopped. An older cousin I hadn't spoken to in years pressed a hand gently to my arm and whispered, "You were brave." One of Jessica's former friends from college leaned in, eyes glassy. "She always had it out for you. People just didn't want to admit it." Even my mother, rigid and reserved in her pale blue silk dress, paused as she passed me. She didn't say much, just a simple nod, but her eyes were soft in a way they hadn't been in a long time. Maybe she understood now what years of biting my tongue had really looked like. The ballroom emptied. The roses began to wilt beneath the stage lights. The cake stood untouched, perfect layers of fondant and sugar flowers guarding a celebration that had never come. I sat alone for a while, not in the seat behind the column, but near the front, close enough to the altar where the light still caught the edge of the floral arch. It was strange how quiet victory felt. There were no cheers, no applause, no confetti falling from the ceiling, just a hollow stillness. But inside me, something had shifted. I hadn't struck back with cruelty. I hadn't tried to humiliate anyone. I had simply told the truth, and that had been enough to break everything open. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Thank you. I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life." That was it. No flourish, no dramatics, just 12 words that carried the full weight of what we both knew now. And I stared at that screen for a long time. Not because I needed validation, but because for once I had been seen, not hidden, not tolerated, not made small. And that was enough. It's been 6 months since that day in the ballroom, since the music stopped meaning anything and the truth finally echoed louder than the vows that were never spoken. Half a year since the glass slipped from Jessica's carefully curated world and cracked open on marble floors for everyone to see. We haven't spoken. No surprise there. Not a word. Not a text. Not even a passive-aggressive birthday message wrapped in sarcasm and exclamation points. She moved cities, I heard. Took a new job. Changed her last name back. Even deleted her wedding photos off social media. I imagine it's easier that way, for her to pretend the whole thing never happened. To frame it like a disaster she didn't cause. That's always been her strength. Rebranding discomfort into someone else's mistake. But I don't need an apology. I don't even need an explanation. Because something in me shifted that day. Something that had been sleeping for years woke up. And now that it's awake, it's not going back to sleep. For most of my life, I thought love had to be earned. Not just love, but visibility, belonging, worth. I thought if I were quieter, smaller, more agreeable, I'd be invited in. I thought if I sat on the sidelines long enough, one day someone would pull me into the center. But the truth is, no one gives you a seat at the table if they're convinced you don't deserve one. And no amount of silence or smiling makes them see you. It just makes you invisible. Growing up with Jessica meant living in her shadow. Not the kind that cools you on a hot day, but the kind that stretches long across the floor, swallowing every bit of sunlight that might have touched your skin. She was always the loud one, the first to speak, the one who corrected my sentences, rolled her eyes at my outfits, laughed too loudly at my dreams. At every family gathering, she dominated the conversation while I faded quietly into the wallpaper. And I let her. Because I thought that was the cost of peace, of being the good one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't start fights at Thanksgiving dinner. But I see it now, that wasn't peace. That was suppression. That was erasure. That wedding taught me something no self-help book ever could. It taught me that dignity doesn't shout, but it also doesn't shrink. That silence can be complicity if it's protecting the wrong person. And that standing up for yourself doesn't make you difficult, it makes you seen. People talk a lot about closure, like it comes with an apology or a neatly tied bow. But sometimes closure is just waking up and realizing you're no longer waiting to be chosen. I didn't want revenge that day. I didn't want to ruin anything. I walked up to Daniel not to destroy, but to defend myself, my worth, my right to not be shoved into a corner like clutter at a party. What I got wasn't justice in the grand, dramatic sense. It wasn't vindication with fireworks and applause. What I got was quieter, deeper. I got self-respect. And that has echoed louder than any mic drop could. These days, I don't beg for space. I take it. I walk into rooms without lowering my voice. I say no without guilt. I wear colors Jessica would have mocked, and I don't apologize for liking things she found beneath her. I laugh too loudly sometimes. I take up space at tables I used to shrink from. And when someone tries to sideline me, I don't get angry. I just step into the light and let the contrast speak for itself. Because I no longer sit behind columns. Not literally, not metaphorically. I don't tolerate relationships that ask me to hide who I am in exchange for conditional love. I don't chase people who only call when they need a mirror to flatter their own reflection. I've made peace with not being part of Jessica's world. Because in losing her, I found something far more important, myself. I found my voice not in shouting, but in choosing to walk away from a table where I was only ever tolerated, never valued. Now I sit where I belong. In the light. In the open. Where my presence isn't a problem to be hidden, but a truth to be witnessed. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. Being seen is never about being perfect. It's about being whole. Emily, 29,